Moving on to the next player though, and there are quite a few links here, because the player who's second in my list is Bénie Adama Traoré, who plays for BK Häcken, also in Sweden, and I think this is rather relevant given the previous discussion we had on Amu at Hammarby, because Bénie Traoré has come in from Cote d'Ivoire. He's coming from ASEC Mimosas, who are probably one of the biggest clubs in West Africa. But Scandinavian clubs have always had strong links to African countries. We only need to look at sort of Right to Dream, how they own FC Nordsjælland in Denmark. The likes of even John Obi Mikel playing at FK Lyn Oslo 15 years ago before moving to Man United and then Chelsea. But African immigration to Sweden has been something which really accelerated in the 70s, 80s, 90s, with civil wars breaking out in many former colonized African nations. And I was quite intrigued by this because it's always seemed to be a good platform for players. Crepin Diatta went to Sarpsborg when he moved from Senegal, and there's been loads of other examples of African players going to Scandinavia as their first move into Europe. So I did a little bit of background, and it turns out that apparently in 1960 there were reportedly just 600 people born in Africa living in Sweden. But by 2000, that had moved up to 55,000. And then by 2009, that was 100,000. So, naturally, that's going to filter into the footballing pyramid. And one of those players who's made that move is another 18-year-old, is another winger, signed from ASEC Mimosas in Cote d'Ivoire. And that is Bénie Adama Traoré. He joined even more recently in January 2021, and has played each game for Häcken this season, who finished third last year. So, it's not like he's coming into a team who are, bottom feeders or who are struggling to battle against relegation to the Superettan, which is the second division. He's coming in and he's starting in a team who should be doing better than they currently are. They've had a bit of a slow start, but he scored 3 goals already, 2 in the cup and 1 in the league. And very similar to Amu, he's still quite small, but he's this ball of energy at the moment. Technically, you can see, I watched about 3 or 4 of his games. Already, you can see that he is technically at a level which is probably higher than the average that you're getting in Sweden at the moment. Especially in those congested central areas. He operates mainly in that right-hand half space. And he just seems very much at home in a very foreign atmosphere. He similarly is a right-sided forward, likes to dribble, but quite intriguingly likes to play in field as opposed to carrying it out wide, like you might see with other right-footed right wingers. I wouldn't go as far to say that it's odd, but it's something that I thought, well, it's quite not abnormal, but just it's something which you don't see all that often. I think that he's somebody who has very good potential just based on the 3 or 4 games that I've seen. And these are games in which Häcken have been a little bit unfortunate, but at the same time haven't really helped themselves. I think he has the potential to be a real asset to them this season, purely because his technical level is already there. He's already bang on, and he has been sort of reading up on sort of on Bénie Traoré. He has been sort of one of the most sought after players at one of West Africa's biggest clubs. So it's no surprise that he's assimilated to the level quite well.
No, absolutely not. I think that he is Hawken in general are really interested in terms of how they recruit. Really clever with the kind of players and markets that they access to get players in. They've obviously got a really good network across certain regions and areas of the world that they recruit from. I expect them to be up towards the top of the table. You said they were third last year. I expected at least the same this year. Interestingly, they've started really slowly, and they've actually lost all 3 games that they've played in Allsvenskan so far. But that does not detract from the performances of Traore. I think with a player like this, he's somebody who I noticed after the second game. I think the match where they lost against Malmo, I kind of watched some of that game back, and he was somebody immediately who stood out. But what I like to do when it's young attacking players that I might not have seen or might not have seen a lot of, one of the first things I try to do is figure out whether they're right-footed or left-footed, just because it gives you a little bit of context. As you said, if they're left-footed and play from the right, you'll expect them inside. If they're right-footed and play from the right, you expect them to go outside a little bit more. The first thing that I noticed was that I really couldn't tell if Traore was right-footed or left-footed because he's got that balance. Not scared to receive the ball on his left foot, not scared to play the ball on his left foot. But when he carries the ball, he does prefer to do it on the right. But as you say, he's coming inside and he moves really smoothly and quickly through those congested spaces. So there's been a couple of points you see him pick up the ball and he plays a give and go with a teammate and he makes the incisive run. And it is so direct when he does it that if the teammate finds the right pass, he's through on goal. He's a player who, similar to Amu, he dribbles a lot, and you will see him carry the ball a lot at the opposition, but he does it really well. He's good at understanding how to keep the ball on the safe side, how to move the ball away from defenders, first touch into space to give himself a little bit of room before he explodes. All of these things you kind of look at and you start to build a picture of a player. And again, we talked about how Amu has came into Swedish football and had to acclimatise. You're absolutely right, Triori has had less time. He only arrived in January of this year, and he's had to acclimatise to life in Sweden extremely quickly. But on the pitch, you can already see that his teammates trust him. And I think that's a huge plus for a young player. You can see his teammates are willing to give him the ball. I think when I started to look at him a little bit more, I think that once you've done this for a little while, when you've looked at lots of players over the years, you kind of automatically start to draw a little bit of comparison between players when you're scouting them. And he reminds me a lot of the first time that I really saw Osman Bukhari play, the Ghanaian winger who moved to Genk last summer for $1 million from Slovenian football. He's somebody who I've wrote about for the Scout Handbook before. He's got a similar profile in terms of the positions that he takes up, his movements, his direct nature towards goal, and he likes to get a shot away or a final pass away. So I think there's a whole lot of promise from Traore at Häcken this year. If anyone gets a chance to catch any of their games or to find highlight packages, I really recommend having a look at him.
Yeah, just on the scouting element that obviously Häcken have done to bring in Bénie Traoré. They also signed a young left back at the same time from ASIC Mimosas by the name of Yannick Adjumani, who hasn't played as much, but doesn't have a contract to the same length, which I think is quite important. They pretty much. I think they gave Triore a contract until 2024, which pretty much outlines how highly they rate him and how much they want to keep a hold of him. But it shows that they do have that scope of scouting in Africa.